On New Year's Eve, my parents shut down my proposal saying, "You don't deserve to carry the family name," and that my brother should marry first. So I cut them off and moved on until years later. A hospital confession revealed why I was only kept alive. Hey Reddit, growing up, my parents made it pretty clear I was the backup kid. I didn't fight it, I just built my own life and walked away. I thought that would be the end of it. Turns out, they had other plans. Before I get into all that, I need to start at the beginning. I'm Joey. I'm 23. I work full-time, keep my head down, pay my bills, and don't ask my parents for anything. I have an identical twin brother named Ross. Identical on paper only. Our faces matched, our builds didn't. Growing up, you wouldn't guess we came from the same house if you watched how we were treated. Ross is taller than me, broader, athletic, the kind of guy adults naturally pat on the back. Teachers loved him. Coaches loved him. My parents, Walter and Lizzie, built their whole identity around him early on. He wasn't just their son, he was their investment. I was the extra part that came with the package. I'm not quiet or timid, never was. I noticed things early and I didn't pretend not to. I use humor when things get uncomfortable, and my parents hated that. They prefer silence and compliance. They called my attitude difficult. Ross didn't have an attitude. Ross had potential. We shared a room growing up, which is where the difference became impossible to ignore. Same room, two different lives. Ross's side had the window. Better light, better air. He had a new desk, clean drawers that didn't stick, shelves that weren't bowing in the middle. When a poster peeled or got ripped, it got replaced. When a gadget came out, it somehow ended up on his side of the room. My side was hand-me-downs. A dresser with one drawer that never closed right. Old paint with scratches that never got touched up. If something broke, it stayed broken. Nobody ever said that was the rule. It just was. You could stand in the doorway and see it clear as day. Physical proof of who mattered more. Lizzie made it worse without saying a word. She touched Ross like she was proud to be seen with him. Hand on the shoulder. Straightening his collar before school. Small gestures that said, "This one is mine." With me, touch only came with correction. Pulling me back from a conversation. Pressing two fingers into my arm to shut me up. A hand on my chest to stop me from stepping forward. I don't remember her hugging me. I remember her adjusting me. Walter wasn't subtle either. Everything Ross did was about the future. Sports were about scholarships. Friends were about connections. If Ross messed up, it was growing pains. If I did the same thing, it was proof I wasn't built right. I didn't cry about it. I didn't beg. I made comments. Short ones, dry ones. Stuff like, "Guess my side of the room didn't qualify for the upgrade." That usually got me a look from Lizzie and a lecture about being dramatic. Ross would smirk sometimes, not in a cruel way. He was a kid enjoying good treatment. He didn't question it because why would he? The birthday dinners were the worst because they pretended to be neutral ground. Joint celebration, same candles, same table, same speeches. One year, we're sitting there with relatives from both sides, and the cake comes out. Big white frosting, blue trim. In the center, written clean and bold, is Ross's name. Just Ross. No space left, no correction, no hesitation. The room goes quiet for a half second, long enough for everyone to notice. I look at the cake, then at my parents, then back at the cake. I say, "Guess I'm sharing his wish this year." Just enough to acknowledge reality. Lizzie snaps back immediately. Tells me to stop being dramatic. Says it's just a cake. A few relatives laugh in that uncomfortable way people do when they don't want to pick a side. Ross looks down at his plate. Nobody fixes it. We eat the cake anyway. That was childhood for me. Nothing explosive. Just 1,000 little reminders of where I ranked. Once, not long after that, I caught Lizzie looking at me in a way that didn't match her usual irritation. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was something tighter. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. It lasted maybe a second before she noticed me looking back. Then her face hardened, and she told me to stop hovering and do something useful. I didn't know what to do with that look at the time, but I remembered it. I started working early, not because they forced me to, because money meant control. It meant rides I didn't have to ask for, clothes I didn't have to justify, space that was mine. Ross didn't need that. Everything showed up for him without effort. Fast forward a few years. I'm 17, out of the house more, spending less time there on purpose. Senior year. Already working more hours than I was sleeping. One afternoon, I stopped by a small bakery near my job. Just needed something quick before heading home. That's where I met Trinity. She was behind the counter, flower on her sleeve, hair pulled back like she'd been working all day. I made a comment about the display looking too good to trust. She shot back that it was fine, as long as I didn't ask for recommendations and then ignore them. No flirting script, no awkwardness, just normal. I paid, she handed me the bag, and for once I wasn't being measured against someone else. No comparison, no ranking, just a conversation that stayed where it was. I walked out thinking how strange it felt to be treated like a whole person without having to earn it. Football ran our house. Not casually, not as a hobby. It was the axis everything rotated around. Fall schedules were built around game days. Dinners were timed around practice. Conversations ended early if a highlight reel was coming on. If you didn't know Ross's position, stats, or next matchup, you weren't really part of the family. Ross played linebacker. Big kid, fast, loud on the field. Coaches loved him. Walter lived for it. He learned the rules late and then acted like he'd invented the sport. Every win was proof he was doing something right as a father. Every loss was the ref's fault or a bad call. He wore team gear like a uniform. He introduced himself as Ross's dad, more often than he used his own name. Ross never lacked support. New cleats every season, extra camps in the summer, private sessions when a coach hinted he could go further. Walter was at every game, early, loud, pacing the sidelines like he was part of the staff. Lizzie packed snacks for the whole team and made sure Ross's jersey was spotless. They praised effort, toughness, leadership, all words that only seemed to apply to one son. I didn't play football. I tried it once, got shoved into a position I didn't care about, and realized fast that the sport itself wasn't the point. The attention was. I quit without a scene. That didn't mean I stopped training. I ran in the mornings before school, lifted in a cheap gym after work, learned discipline without an audience. I didn't ask for rides or gear. If I needed something, I bought it. If I didn't have it, I adjusted. That became my way. I competed in smaller events, local runs, amateur meets, stuff that didn't come with crowds or cheer sections. I told my parents the dates once. They nodded, said they'd see. They didn't. Not once. No texts, no apologies. Just silence, followed by questions later about how Ross did at practice. The difference wasn't subtle. When Ross played, the house buzzed. When I had something going on, the house stayed the same. I stopped reminding them. It wasn't pride, it was efficiency. Reminding people who don't care just wastes time. Walter never asked about my training. He asked if Ross had eaten enough protein. He asked if Ross's coach had called back. He asked if Ross felt confident about the next game. My work, my schedule, my goals didn't register. Lizzie was quieter, but sometimes worse. I'd be stretching in the driveway or running drills in the backyard and I'd feel eyes on me. I'd look up and catch her watching from the kitchen window. Her face never showed approval or annoyance in those moments. It was something else. Tight. Unsettled. Like she wanted to say something and didn't know how. The second I noticed, she'd turn away or snap at me to stop pacing holes in the grass. One Saturday, I had an event Trinity knew about. She'd asked earlier in the week, casual, like it wasn't a big deal. I told her she didn't have to come. She showed up anyway, sat on the bleachers with a coffee and watched. The stands were empty. No Walter pacing, no Lizzie taking photos, just her, a few strangers, and the sound of shoes on pavement. After, we walked back to the car. She didn't say anything right away. Then she asked, "They always skip this stuff?" I shrugged. Same move I'd perfected over the years. "They're busy." She didn't argue, didn't comfort, just nodded like she understood exactly what busy meant in that context. That was the thing about her. She noticed patterns and didn't pretend not to. Back home, Ross came in talking about practice. Walter listened. Lizzie asked questions. I went to my room and stretched in silence. I didn't resent Ross for it. I resented the rules of the house. Sports weren't about teamwork or growth there. They were currency, status, proof. So I kept training without witnesses. I got stronger without praise. I learned early that silence was easier than disappointment, and that discipline didn't need an audience to work. The next 4 years were a blur of shifts and syllabi. I didn't glide through college. There was no smooth path, no safety net, no stretch where things felt easy. I worked my way through it the same way I handled everything else in my life. Head down, no complaints, no expectation that anyone would step in if I stumbled. Full class load every semester, part-time jobs stacked whenever I could manage them. Sometimes 2 at once. Early mornings that started before the sun was up. Late nights that ended with me eating whatever was cheapest and fastest. Weeks blurred together. Wake up, work, class, work again, sleep. Repeat. I didn't tell my parents when things were hard. Not because I was hiding it, but because they never asked. They didn't check in about exams or deadlines or whether I was burning out. I didn't need applause anyway. Applause doesn't pay tuition. I needed the degree. That was the whole point. Trinity was the only consistent presence through all of it. She didn't treat my schedule like something to fix. She didn't give speeches or try to hype me up like a coach before a game. She just existed in my life without conditions. Coffee waiting before early exams. Food in the fridge when I got home late and barely had the energy to speak. A simple, "You good?" that didn't demand a detailed answer or a performance. If I said yes, she accepted it. If I said no, she didn't panic. That steadiness mattered more than encouragement ever could. Graduation day was supposed to be neutral. That's what I told myself. Public space, too many people around for anything weird to happen. Caps and gowns everywhere. Families packed together on metal chairs that creaked when people shifted. I figured at worst it would be quiet and awkward, maybe a little tense. I underestimated how intentional my parents could be when they had an audience. We found our seats early. Ross was a few rows ahead of me, already posing for pictures with Walter and Lizzie. Walter's arm was locked around Ross's shoulders, tight, like he was afraid someone might pull him away at the last second. Lizzie kept adjusting Ross's gown, smoothing wrinkles that weren't there, fixing the cap that didn't need fixing. She looked proud in a way she never looked standing next to me. I stood there with Trinity, watching it happen. I didn't step in. I didn't need to. I already knew how this part played out. The ceremony itself passed in pieces. Names called, applause rising and falling in waves, people cheering louder for some names than others. When Ross's name was read, the clapping around us got louder. When mine was read, Trinity clapped immediately. Ross clapped too. I saw him turn halfway, scanning the crowd for our parents. They clapped, but it felt late, like they were remembering they were supposed to. After it ended, the lawn filled up fast. Cameras everywhere, balloons bobbing over heads, parents hugging their kids like they were seeing them for the first time. Walter waved us over and told us to follow him to the parking lot. He said it with that tone he used when he had something planned and wanted an audience. Ross got there first. Walter stopped next to a shiny black Mustang parked near the curb. Clean, new, impossible to miss. He reached into his pocket and tossed Ross the keys. Loud. Deliberate. "You earned it," he said, like he was announcing a scholarship win. People around us turned. A couple of Ross's old teammates cheered. Someone whistled. Phones came out instantly. Lizzie hugged Ross, quick and tight, like this moment had been rehearsed down to the timing. Ross laughed, surprised but pleased, holding the keys like he wasn't sure if they were real. Then Walter turned to me. He reached into his jacket and handed me a small box. Light enough that I already knew what it was before I opened it. Inside was a watch. Cheap metal band. The kind you buy last minute because you feel like you should bring something. Lizzie smiled and said, "We're proud of you too, son," in the same tone someone uses when they remember to thank a waiter. I looked at the watch, then at the car, then back at the watch. I didn't plan what I said next. It just came out. "Guess I'll be on time for work." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. Just a comment that landed exactly where it needed to. For a split second, Lizzie's face changed. Not anger, not annoyance, fear. Like I'd said something I wasn't supposed to know. Like I'd brushed against a wire she'd been taping over for years. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and sharp, and for that brief moment she looked exposed. Then it disappeared. Her jaw set. Her mouth tightened. "Why do you always have to do this?" she snapped. "You can't just let one moment be about your brother?" Walter stepped in immediately. Said I was making a scene. Said this wasn't the time. Said I always had to turn things into something they weren't. People around us pretended not to listen while very clearly listening. Conversations nearby slowed. Phones angled slightly in our direction. Trinity didn't say a word. She stood next to me, steady, her hand brushing my arm once. Not to stop me, just to remind me I wasn't standing there alone. Ross looked between us, confused. He didn't say anything. He still had the keys in his hand, turning them over slowly, like he wasn't sure where to put them or what to do next. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I closed the watch box and slipped it into my pocket. I told Ross congratulations and meant it. Then I turned and walked away with Trinity. That was the moment something shut off in me. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped hoping effort would eventually balance the scale. I stopped thinking that if I did enough, things would even out. In the days after, my parents acted like nothing had happened. A text about dinner plans. A question about whether I'd set up the watch yet. Walter sent Ross links about upgrades for the car, like graduation had only belonged to one of us. I replied when necessary. Short answers. No tone, no openings. Graduation was supposed to mark the start of something. It did, just not what they thought. 6 months later, New Year's Eve rolled around and my parents tried to sell it as a reset. The New Year's Eve party was supposed to be neutral ground. That's how Lizzie pitched it. Both families, one house, clean slate. No drama, just food, noise, and counting down like everyone else. Walter and Lizzie's place was packed. Relatives I barely talked to. People who remembered Ross's stats better than my job title. Kids running between rooms. Music too loud. Everyone holding plates they didn't really want. It was loud enough that you couldn't have a real conversation, which I figured was the point. Trinity stayed close to me. She knew what these events were like. I had the ring in my jacket pocket, heavier than it should have been for something that small. I'd thought through this 100 times. Where to stand. When to do it. I wasn't nervous about her answer. I was realistic about my parents. About an hour in, Lizzie pulled Trinity aside. I noticed immediately. Lizzie didn't ask. She just leaned in, hand on Trinity's elbow, steering her toward the kitchen like it was nothing. I stayed where I was and watched Ross talk to an uncle about work. 10 minutes later, Trinity came back. Same expression. Calm. No anger. She waited until we were near the hallway and said quietly, "Your mom says you can be difficult." She said it like a warning. I nodded. Yeah, that tracks. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was. And I was. At least I thought I was. Walter clinked a glass. Loud, sharp, the music cut, everyone turned. I hadn't planned on a toast yet, but apparently Walter had. He stood in the middle of the living room, arm already around Ross's shoulders. He smiled big, bigger than necessary. He talked about family, about growth, about the coming year and how proud he was of Ross's direction, his discipline, his stability, his trajectory. He used that word twice. He didn't mention me. Not once. People nodded. A few clapped early. Lizzie beamed like this was the point of the night. Ross looked uncomfortable, but didn't pull away. Walter finished with, "Some people just know how to build something solid." That was my cue. I wasn't waiting for the room to come back to me. I stepped forward before the applause died down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask permission. I took Trinity's hand, dropped to one knee, and pulled out the ring. The room went silent in a way that felt intentional, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen. Walter had been drinking just enough to make his confidence louder than his judgment. Before Trinity could even react, Lizzie gasped and stepped forward. Walter moved faster. He reached down and grabbed my wrist. Hard. "What are you doing?" he snapped. I stood up slowly and pulled my hand back. "Proposing?" Walter laughed once, sharp and ugly. "No, you're not." Lizzie jumped in. "This isn't appropriate. You don't do this here." Walter cut me off. "You haven't earned the right to use this family's name like that. You have nothing to offer her." He gestured toward Ross without even looking at him. "He does." That's when Ross finally spoke. "What the hell are you talking about?" Lizzie waved him off. "Not now." Ross stepped forward. "No, right now. You're embarrassing yourselves." Walter ignored him completely and turned back to me. "You want to play husband? You can't even match your brother. You think love makes up for stability?" The room started buzzing. People whispering, phones coming out. I saw Lara, my cousin, near the couch, already holding her phone up, eyes lit like she'd been waiting for something to happen all night. Ross raised his voice. "Stop, both of you. This is insane." Lizzie snapped back at him. "Don't take his side." "I'm taking the right side," Ross said. "You're out of line." Walter told him to shut up, said he was being disrespectful, said I was ruining the night. I looked at Trinity. She hadn't moved. She was calm in a way that made everything else look ridiculous. I said one sentence. "We're leaving." I didn't wait for a response. I took Trinity's hand and walked out. Behind us, voices overlapped. Lizzie shouting, Walter demanding someone stop us, Ross arguing, Lara filming everything. By the time we got home, my phone was already lighting up. Lara had posted the video as a reel, captioned something about family drama with a laughing emoji. It spread faster than I expected. Comments piled up, people calling out my parents by name, asking why they'd humiliate their son like that. Walter and Lizzie lost it online. They commented back, long paragraphs, accusing me of abandoning them, of betraying family, painting themselves as heartbroken parents whose son turned on them publicly. The family group chat exploded. Aunts, uncles, cousins weighing in, some telling me I should apologize, others saying both sides were wrong, a few pretending they didn't see anything wrong at all. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I left the chat, blocked numbers, changed settings. By the end of the night, my phone was quiet. That was the start of no contact. I didn't announce that I was cutting contact. I didn't send a final message or explain myself. I just disappeared. I changed my number and wiped my online presence. I left one line open for Ross only. No one else got it. I set my email so anything from my parents went straight into a folder I never opened. I didn't check it. Silence isn't dramatic when it's deliberate. Life got quieter fast. Just work, training, sleep, repeat. I picked up more hours. Took a better position when it came up. Started making decisions without running them past anyone who thought they owned me. Trinity stayed solid through all of it. She didn't treat the no contact like a crisis or a phase. She didn't push me to talk about my parents, and she didn't pretend they didn't exist either. If I brought them up, she listened. If I didn't, she let it go. That mattered more than comfort ever could. The chaos faded. Routine took its place. Mornings stayed early. Training stayed consistent. Evenings stayed quiet. For the first time, my life felt like it belonged to me instead of reacting to someone else's expectations. A few months in, we went to her parents' place for her birthday. Nothing fancy, dinner at home, cake from a local place. Her parents were normal in a way that still caught me off guard. They asked about work. They listened to answers. No comparisons, no rankings. After dinner, when things slowed down and her parents stepped into the kitchen, I asked Trinity to step out back with me. No crowd, no toast, no interruption. I didn't get on one knee this time. I just handed her the ring and said, "I still want this, just without an audience that hates me." She laughed once, then said yes like it wasn't a question. That was it. No chaos, no commentary. Just a clean moment that didn't need defending. We didn't post it right away. We told the people who mattered. Life moved forward without noise. About a year later, I heard about Ross's engagement by accident. A coworker mentioned seeing something online and asked if that was my brother. I checked once. One photo, already making the rounds. Ross standing next to his fiancée, smiling in a way that looked genuine. I didn't see an invite. At first, I didn't question it. It made sense in a way. We hadn't spoken much since New Year's. I figured Ross had chosen his side. It stung, but not enough to reopen anything. I'd already accepted that distance was the cost of peace. A week later, Ross called. I almost didn't answer. I picked up out of curiosity, not hope. "Hey," he said. He sounded tense. That was new. I told him he had 5 minutes. He didn't argue. He explained why I wasn't invited to the engagement party. Walter and Lizzie had pushed hard. Said inviting me would send the wrong message. Said it would stir things up. Said it would shift attention away from Ross's moment. They framed it as protection. Ross went along with it. Not because he agreed, but because he froze. Same pressure. Same habits. "I hated myself for it," he said. "I should have called you immediately." I let him talk. He didn't soften it. He didn't excuse it. He apologized. Clean and direct. I believed him. I told him I'd assumed the worst, and that part was on me. I told him I wasn't angry. I was tired. There's a difference. He asked if we could meet. I said yes, but not at either of our houses. We met for coffee. No parents, no background noise. Just two grown men sitting across from each other without anyone managing the conversation. Ross talked more than I expected. About how the proposal incident cracked something open. How seeing our parents humiliate me in public felt different than hearing them do it privately. How defending me didn't come naturally at first, and how much that bothered him afterward. "I thought the pressure was normal," he said. "I didn't realize how much of it missed me completely. I didn't unload years of resentment. I didn't need to." He wasn't asking for forgiveness for the past. He was taking responsibility for the present. I told him the truth. None of this was his fault. He didn't design the rules. He just benefited from them. That didn't make him the enemy. It made him human. He looked relieved, like he'd been holding something heavy without knowing what it was. We didn't hug. We shook hands. That felt right. After that, we talked occasionally. No forced closeness. No pretending the past didn't exist. Just honesty and space. That's when something finally settled for me. I stopped tying Ross to our parents in my head. He wasn't the reason I grew up overlooked. He just grew up protected. Life stayed quiet, good quiet. Trinity and I moved forward without interference. Plans stayed ours. Decisions stayed clean. For the first time, my future wasn't competing with my past. We kept the wedding small on purpose. Trinity and I didn't want a crowd that felt like an obligation. We wanted people who knew us, not people who needed to be impressed. The guest list was tight. Friends who'd been around long enough to know the real version of us. Her parents, a few relatives on our sides who didn't ask weird questions. Ross, Laura. That was it. Walter and Lizzie were not invited. There was no debate about that. No announcement. No explanation. An invitation is a privilege, not a birthright. They'd lost that a long time ago. The day itself was calm. No rushing. Trinity looked relaxed in a way that made everything else fade out. Her parents treated me like I already belonged there. No speeches about family legacy. No comments about what I owed anyone. Ross showed up early. He didn't make it awkward. Didn't act like a mediator. He shook my hand, told me congrats, and said Trinity looked happy. He meant it. That was enough. The ceremony was simple. No dramatic pauses. No long vows that tried to fix old wounds. We promised what mattered and moved on. When it was done, I felt lighter than I expected. Not because I'd gained something, but because I hadn't had to defend it. We didn't post anything that day. Phones stayed in pockets. The night ended quietly. Lara changed that. A few days later, she posted photos from the wedding. Not maliciously, not kindly either. Just Lara doing what Lara always does. Centering herself near the moment and letting the rest burn. The posts spread fast. People noticed who wasn't there. Comments started stacking. Questions followed. Walter and Lizzie found out through Instagram. That's when things got loud. Their reaction had nothing to do with missing me. It had everything to do with being seen. The comments hit where it hurt. Why weren't you at your son's wedding? What kind of parents miss that? This isn't the first time, is it? They responded publicly. Long replies. Defensive explanations. Vague statements about boundaries and misunderstandings. They framed it like they'd been pushed out, like they were victims of a son who'd turned cold. It didn't work. People remembered the New Year's video. Screenshots resurfaced. Clips got reposted. Lizzie's name started showing up in comment threads with words she hated being associated with. Walter tried to joke it off at first. Then he got angry. Then desperate. They moved to private messages when public sympathy didn't show up. Texts, emails, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Guilt wrapped in concern. Anger dressed up as heartbreak. Claims that I'd embarrassed them, that I'd humiliated the family, that I'd abandoned them when they needed me most. They never once asked if I was happy. I didn't answer anything. I didn't block right away either. I let it pile up and watch the pattern repeat itself without me in it. Then I blocked everything and went back to my life. Trinity didn't ask me to explain my silence. She didn't need reassurance. She saw the messages before I blocked them. She read enough to understand what kind of people we were dealing with. They're mad they weren't seen, she said once. That was it. No analysis, no comforting speech, just the truth. The internet didn't let them off the hook this time either. More comments, more questions, people noticing patterns. Old stories coming out from relatives who'd kept quiet before. Lara kept posting, feeding it without even trying to. Walter and Lizzie spiraled. You could see it in the way their messages shifted. 1 minute furious, the next pleading. One email accused me of being ungrateful. The next begged me to remember everything they'd done for me. I ignored all of it. The quiet returned. This time, it stuck. A few nights after things finally slowed down, my phone rang. Ross's name came up. I answered. Hey, he said. He sounded serious, not panicked. That got my attention. I asked what was going on. He paused for a second, then said, It's about Mom and Dad. Something's happened. Dad wants to talk to you. He says it's important. I didn't answer right away. Lizzie didn't have some dramatic public collapse. No cameras, no scene. She went down at home and didn't come back up fast enough for anyone to pretend it was nothing. The paramedics used words nobody likes. Heart rhythm, stroke risk, observation. Overnight turned into tests. Tests turned into that specific kind of quiet that only happens when doctors stop guessing and start measuring. She didn't call me herself. She asked Ross to do it. Ross called late that night. His voice was steady, but there was something under it I hadn't heard before. Not panic. Wait. She's in the hospital, he said. She asked for you. Dad wants to talk too. They're saying it's important. I didn't answer right away. Is this an apology thing? I asked. No, Ross said. Then he hesitated. This is different. Ross doesn't hesitate. That pause mattered. I told him I'd come once. One visit. No promises. No follow-up conversations. He didn't argue. Okay, he said. Quiet. Trinity drove with me. She didn't lecture me about forgiveness or closure. She didn't try to prepare me for anything. We parked, walked inside, and stopped at the entrance to Lizzie's floor. She squeezed my hand once. I'll be right here. That was all I needed. Lizzie looked smaller in the hospital bed. Not fragile. Smaller. Like someone who'd finally run out of energy to manage appearances. Walter stood by the window, arms crossed, staring outside like the city had answers. Ross stood near the door, tense, like he already knew whatever was coming wouldn't leave him intact. Lizzie didn't waste time. I don't have much time, she said. I waited. And I don't want to die with this in me. That told me everything. This wasn't about me. It was about her not wanting to carry it any longer. She took a breath. We only wanted one child. Walter didn't look at me. He nodded. That was always the plan, Lizzie continued. One pregnancy, one future, one life we could manage. Ross frowned. What are you saying? When the doctor confirmed twins, she said, we panicked. We didn't talk about it like a blessing. We talked about options. I said nothing. Selective termination, Lizzie said. She didn't soften it. Ross sucked in a sharp breath. You're joking. Walter finally spoke, voice calm, clinical. The specialists explained the risks. Multiple consultations. You were identified as hemodynamically necessary. Losing you would likely mean losing him too. The words sat there, ugly and cold. Lizzie swallowed. You were smaller. The doctors said you were physically weaker. Ross turned toward me. What does that mean? Walter answered like he was reading off a report. He was providing critical blood flow, shared nutrients. Terminating him would have compromised the stronger fetus. Ross went still. You mean me? Lizzie nodded. So, Ross said slowly, I'm alive because of him. Yes, she whispered. The room felt tight, like the air had thickened. Lizzie started crying then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just tears sliding down while her hands shook. Every time I looked at you, she said to me, I remembered what we almost did, what we would have done. I stayed still. No shaking, no rush of anger, just pieces clicking into place. The correction instead of affection, the tension, the way she touched me like I might break something just by existing. Walter cleared his throat. We regret how things turned out. I looked at him. That's it? Lizzie reached for my hand. I stepped back before she could touch me. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. I finally spoke. Sorry for what? She blinked. For everything. I shook my head. No. Be specific. She struggled. For how we treated you. I let a beat pass. Sorry for getting caught? Or sorry the internet noticed? Or sorry you had to say it out loud before something worse happened? Walter snapped. That's not fair. I turned to him. You reduced my existence to a medical function 5 minutes ago. Don't talk to me about fair. Ross spoke then, voice strained. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I know, I said, and I meant it. Lizzie was crying harder now. I didn't know how to love you, she said. I was afraid of you. Every time I saw you, I thought about what could have happened. That was the closest thing to honesty she'd ever given me. I didn't raise my voice. I wasn't your difficult son, I said. I was your tourniquet. Walter opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. And now the cord is cut. No one said anything after that. Even the machines felt quieter. I stepped back toward the door. Ross looked like he wanted to stop me, to say something meaningful, to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I shook my head once. Lizzie whispered my name. I didn't answer. I walked out. Trinity stood the second she saw me. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't study my face. She put her arm around me and we left. I didn't feel broken walking out of that hospital. I felt finished, like something had finally been named and put down. So I'll ask you this. What would you do if you found out you weren't kept because you were loved, or even tolerated, but because you were necessary? If your entire childhood suddenly made sense in the worst possible way, would you forgive because they're sorry now? Would you stay connected to people who only valued you when you were useful to someone else's survival? Or would you walk away clean and build something better? I chose distance. I chose the life I already built, and I don't regret it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.